The alarm on my console screamed before I even saw the wreckage on my scanner, and my hands were moving before my brain caught up. I am Daniel Pierce, a salvage medic on the edge of nowhere, running a two-man outpost on a rock called Varan 9. Most days are quiet. That day was not. A pod had slammed into the debris field outside my station, tumbling end over end, trailing smoke that had no business existing in vacuum. My scanner locked onto a single life sign inside, and it was fading fast, blinking weaker with every second I hesitated. I did not hesitate. I grabbed my suit, sealed it halfway through the airlock, and fired my thruster pack toward the wreck before my partner Owen could even finish shouting my name over the comm. "Daniel, wait for backup," he said, his voice cracking with static. "There is no time," I said, and I meant it. The pod's hull was buckling. Whoever was inside had maybe 2 minutes before the whole thing lost pressure completely. I reached it, cut through the emergency seal with my torch, and pulled the hatch open by brute force. Inside was a woman, if I can even call her that. Her skin held a faint blue undertone, and thin lines running across her arms and neck glowed a dim, pulsing gold, like veins carrying light instead of blood. She was covered in wounds that should have killed her 3 times over. My scanner buzzed a warning in my ear. Unidentified physiology. Possible combat-grade enhancement. Proceed with caution. I ignored it. A warning light does not change what a person needs when they are dying in front of you. I pulled her free, secured her to my back harness, and burned every bit of fuel I had getting us both back to the station before her heart, or whatever organ served that purpose, stopped for good. Owen met me at the airlock, his face pale. "You brought her inside? Daniel, do you have any idea what she could be?" "She could be dead in the next 60 seconds if I don't get her to the table," I said, already moving. I laid her down and got to work. Her biology was nothing like ours, but wounds are wounds, and bleeding is bleeding, no matter what color it runs. I stapled where I needed to staple, burned closed what needed burning, and used every trick I had learned patching up soldiers on worse days than this one. It was not elegant, it was not clean, but it worked. Her vitals steadied around the 2-hour mark, and for the first time since I had pulled her out of that pod, I let myself breathe. Owen stood in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at the woman on my table like she might wake up and end the both of us. "The station AI flagged her," he said quietly. "It says her scarring pattern matches something in old military archives, something called an ender." I had heard rumors of enders before, the way you hear rumors of ghosts. Supposedly the deadliest warriors ever produced by any species, engineered and trained for one purpose only: to end wars before they could properly begin. Supposedly extinct. Supposedly a story parents told to frighten their children into behaving. "Rumors," I said. "She's a person who needed help. That's all that matters right now." Owen did not look convinced, but he did not argue either. He just watched, the way you watch a storm cloud that has not decided yet whether it will pass you by or swallow you whole. She woke up 11 hours later, and it was nothing like the peaceful, grateful waking I had imagined. One moment I was checking the readout on her heart rate, and the next her hand was locked around my throat, her eyes wide and burning gold, her whole body coiled like a spring about to release. I felt the strength in her grip and understood immediately that if she wanted me gone, I would already be gone. She stopped herself less than an inch from crushing my windpipe. Her eyes searched my face, confused, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that made no sense to her. "You are not armed," she said, her voice rough, translated a half-second late through the small device clipped to my collar. "You are not afraid." "I'm terrified," I said honestly, my voice strained under her grip. "I'm just too stubborn to show it." Something flickered across her face, and she released me, pulling her hand back like she had touched something hot. "Why did you save me?" she asked. "Because you were dying, and I could stop it," I said, rubbing my throat. "That's usually enough reason where I come from." She studied me for a long moment, the gold lines on her skin dimming slowly as her pulse settled. "My name is Kira," she said finally. "You should not have brought me here." "Why not?" "Because everyone who finds me either wants to use me or wants me dead. There is no third option in my experience." I sat down slowly across from her, keeping my hands visible, the way you do with an animal that might still decide to bolt. "I'm Daniel," I said, "and where I come from, there's usually a third option. It's called leaving people alone once you've helped them." She almost smiled at that, though it looked like an expression she had not used in a very long time. Over the next hour, in short, careful sentences, she told me what she was, not because she trusted me, but because she said I deserved to know exactly what kind of danger I had pulled into my home. She had been part of an order created generations ago by a coalition of frightened governments, warriors bred and trained from birth to be weapons capable of ending entire conflicts single-handedly. They were feared, respected, and eventually deemed too dangerous to exist, once the wars they were built for finally ended. So the same governments that made them decided to erase them, quietly, one by one. Kira was one of the last. She had been running for longer than she could clearly remember, hiding in ports and drifting through empty systems, always one step ahead of the hunters sent after her. Her pod had taken damage escaping the last group that found her, and she had crashed near my station purely by chance. "You should hand me over," she said, staring at the metal ceiling above her cot. "There will be a reward, enough to buy you a better life than this one." "I don't want a better life bought with someone else's blood," I said. "You do not even know me. I know you were dying, and now you're not. That's a start." She turned her head and looked at me like I was the strange one in the room, not her. "The hunters found us 2 days later. I should have expected it. Her pod had a beacon, and beacons do not stay silent forever, not when someone is listening for exactly that signal across a dozen systems." Owen spotted the ship first, a sleek black vessel with no registration markings, sliding into a slow orbit around our little rock like a shadow settling over the sun. "Daniel," he said, voice tight, "we have company, and I don't think they're here for spare parts." Kira was on her feet before I even finished relaying the message, her wounds still healing, her steps unsteady but her focus absolute. "You need to give me a weapon and get somewhere safe," she said. "I will handle this." "You can barely stand," I said. "I have handled worse while dying." "That's not exactly reassuring." She almost laughed, a short, surprised sound, like the idea of humor had caught her off guard. The ship docked without asking permission, which told me everything about the manners of whoever was inside. 3 figures came through the airlock moments later, tall and armored, moving with the practiced calm of people who did this for a living and had never once lost. Their leader spoke first, his voice flat and businesslike, like he was collecting a debt rather than hunting a person. "We tracked the beacon here. Hand over the ender and this ends peacefully. Refuse, and it ends anyway, just less peacefully for you." Owen's hand hovered near the emergency lockdown switch, waiting for my signal. I did not give it. "She's not a package," I said, stepping between them and the hallway leading to Kira. "She's a person, and she's not going anywhere with you." The leader tilted his head, studying me the way you study something you find mildly confusing rather than threatening. "You do understand what she is capable of, don't you? What she's done?" "I understand what she is capable of just fine," I said. "I also understand what fear does to good people when they're told someone is a monster long enough that they stop checking if it's true." He did not seem moved by my speech. Diplomacy was clearly not going to be the deciding factor here. That was when Kira stepped out from the hallway behind me, standing straighter than her condition should have allowed, the gold lines across her skin glowing brighter with every passing second. "Leave," she said simply. "This is your only warning." The leader's mouth curved into something between a smile and a sneer. "Warnings are for people with leverage," he said. "You have none left." What followed happened faster than I could properly track, a blur of motion and controlled chaos that left me flat against the wall, doing the only thing I really could, which was staying out of the way and trusting Kira knew exactly what she was doing. She moved like something out of an old story, precise and economical, never wasting a single motion, disarming one hunter before he even registered she had closed the distance between them. But her strength was not fully back yet, and I could see the strain behind her eyes, the way her breathing grew ragged after only a minute of exertion. The second hunter turned toward me instead, deciding the easier target was the unarmed human standing uselessly by the wall. I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I grabbed a length of pipe from the maintenance rack beside me and swung it as hard as I could, catching him off guard with something no trained fighter expects: sheer unpredictable stubbornness from a man with absolutely nothing to lose. It was not skillful, it was not graceful, but it worked long enough to buy Kira the half-second she needed to finish the job properly. The third hunter, watching his companions fall in front of him, made the wise decision to retreat back toward the ship rather than test his luck any further. Kira stood in the center of the room afterward, breathing hard, one hand braced against the wall for support. "You should have stayed back," she said between breaths. "You should have expected that I wouldn't," I said, tossing the pipe aside and helping steady her before she could collapse. She looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable behind her eyes. "No one has ever fought beside me before," she said quietly. "They fight because of me, or against me, or they run from me. No one has ever simply stood with me. Well, I said, consider this a first then. The ship outside left within the hour, deciding the beacon signal and the promised reward were not worth whatever had just happened inside our station. I doubted they would report the failure honestly to whoever was paying them, but that was a problem for another day. Owen finally exhaled, sagging against the console like his legs had just remembered how to be afraid. I need a very long drink, he muttered, and possibly a new career. Kira spent the following days recovering fully, her strength returning in slow, steady increments, the gold lines on her skin settling into a calm, steady glow, rather than the sharp pulsing I had first seen. I checked on her every few hours, partly out of medical caution, and partly, if I am honest, because I had simply grown to enjoy her company. She was quiet by nature, careful with her words, like someone who had spent her whole life being told that silence was safer than speaking. But slowly, in small pieces, she began to open up. She told me about the training she had endured as a child, the discipline drilled into her before she was even old enough to understand what it meant. She told me about the wars her order had ended, conflicts that would have killed millions if left to run their course, and the strange, hollow feeling of being celebrated as a hero one year and hunted as a threat the next. They built us to be necessary, she said one evening, sitting across from me in the small mess hall, sharing a meal that her body could only partially process but seemed to enjoy anyway. The moment we were no longer necessary, we became inconvenient instead. That's not fair, I said. Fair has very little to do with survival, she said. I learned that a long time ago. Maybe, I said, but that doesn't mean you have to accept it as the only way things can be. She studied me again, that same searching look she had given me the moment she first woke up, like she was still trying to understand what kind of creature I was, and why I did not fit the patterns she had learned to expect from the rest of the galaxy. Your species is strange, Daniel, she said. You have no enhancements, no extraordinary strength, no special training that I have seen, and yet you charged into a fight you could not possibly win, for a stranger who could have killed you the moment we met. Humans do that, I said, shrugging. We're not always the strongest or the fastest in the room, but we tend to be the most stubborn, and sometimes that counts for more than people expect. It counted for everything, in that moment, she said quietly. A few days later, once she was fully healed and steady on her feet again, she stood by the airlock, a small pack of supplies slung over her shoulder, the closest thing to a goodbye I imagined she knew how to give. I should move on before another beacon draws more attention here, she said. I have already put your station at risk once. You don't owe us anything, I said. You don't have to leave because you feel like a debt needs settling. That is not why I am considering staying, she said, and something about the way she said it made my chest tighten in a way I had not expected. Then why? She was quiet for a long moment, looking out the small viewport toward the stars beyond, the same stars she had spent her whole life running through, always one step ahead of people who saw her only as a weapon or a threat. Because for the first time since I can remember, she said finally, someone looked at me and saw a person worth saving, not a tool worth using, and not a monster worth fearing. I would like to understand what that feels like a little longer, if you will allow it. I think that can be arranged, I said, and I meant it more than I had meant almost anything in a long time. Owen groaned dramatically from across the room, muttering something about extra rations and paperwork nobody asked for. But even he could not hide the small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Kira stayed. Word did eventually spread, quietly at first, then less quietly, about the small outpost on the edge of nowhere, where a legendary weapon of war had chosen to remain, not because she was ordered to, and not because she was trapped, but because she had simply been offered something no one had ever offered her before, a place where she was allowed to simply exist as herself. Other hunters came, occasionally, drawn by old rumors and older bounties. Each time, they found not just a warrior ready to defend herself, but a station full of people willing to stand beside her, unwilling to let fear decide who deserved protection and who did not. I do not know exactly what the future holds for either of us, tangled together now in a story neither of us expected to be part of, but I do know this much for certain. They warned me she was the deadliest thing in the galaxy. Nobody warned me that the deadliest thing in the galaxy simply wanted someone to look her in the eye, and not flinch.